not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned the very unique bat coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification becomes a very harmful virus as now.
All right, there you have it. Dr. Robert Dabali joins me. When I saw the story, I definitely wanted to get his take on it. He practices infectious disease, adult and pediatric infectious disease in northwest suburbs of Chicago. Check him out at germbusters.com. He's also a clinical assistant professor of medicine at the University of Illinois, and he joins us once again for his perspective. And, Doctor, thank you for being here. What do you make of this report? And maybe you can unpack it for us. How credible do you think she is? And what's she saying?
Well, of all the people in the world that would know what they're talking about, she's one of them. She worked in this Hong Kong University laboratory that was a WH Center of Excellence, and that lab is the lab that did most of the work on the SARS virus back when that came out and was a problem. I think these are like the world's leading experts on these human coronaviruses. Now, she was actually doing a work. She's been characterized as a laboratory postdoc assistant, but when you've got a stratified list, there's only 20 people in the world that work with us. I mean, a laboratory assistant postdoc is a pretty smart person.
Right.
She's an MD, PhD, earned her education in China. And she actually left her husband behind in Hong Kong because she was so worried about herself being disappeared because of what she was actually reporting on videos, which were canceled in China. But in this paper, which I read through, it's quite dense. Even somebody like me has trouble with it. I'm not a virologist. But she proposed a mechanism by which that this virus could actually be constructed, built on a backbone of a recently isolated virus that was isolated from bats in a cave. And then what she points out, it's like a Frankenstein virus. It has the ears of a rabbit, the hands of monkeys, the tail of a horse. And she points out that there's certain subsets of the genetic sequence of the virus that appear to have been, if I don't want to say surgically maneuvered, but that have been spliced in. And she has identified these things called codons, which are 3 base pairs in a row, which are usually hallmark such a laboratory maneuver. And she's actually published on the COVID-19 virus in a couple of studies about its infectivity in hamsters and such. But despite the fact that she wasn't an expert or wasn't actually working on human-to-human transmission, what she's talking about is the virus itself. How was it constructed? She actually puts in a cookbook recipe of how to do it yourself. If you're a virologist, you take this, you do this, and then you pass it through humanized mice that have these ACE2 receptors in them, and you strengthen the affinity or the liking of the ACE2 receptor through the virus. And what she says to me, a non-virologist, infectious disease doctor who's, God, I can work with this stuff, but I don't, I don't know it like these people do. It makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
But that being said, is she going to be received by the scientific community? What she's actually stating here is that there was an act of war by the Chinese government. Now, if a government somewhere says that there was an act of war committed against us, that calls for a reaction. So therefore, I would have to think that a lot of what she said is going to be downplayed. But interestingly, in the last 24 hours, there's a second Chinese expatriate who's being held in secret in Europe, who's a defector,
Wow.
who's saying similarly the same thing. And he's afraid to come to the United States because, and this story is just broken too in the news in the last 24 hours, about the number of people in the scientific community and in the law enforcement community and the government that have financial ties to China have been enriched by Chinese. So he won't come to the United States because he's scared of all the the cooperators in government here that have been enriched by China.
So if I had to ask you, Doctor, there was an official report, and scientists claimed, and they said, look, no, this came from a wet market. It was not out of a Wuhan lab. We're now hearing reports that may not indeed be the case, but it probably may have been bioengineered. Do you think it got out accidentally? Do you think China, for some larger agenda or some other motive, deliberately released it? Would they be willing to allow some of their own people to die in an effort to have cover? I mean, and again, we're speculating here, but I'm just sitting back wondering what purpose this would serve to allow something like this to go global.
Well, I can tell you what I think based on reading the tea leaves and so on.
Sure.
The circumstances. There was a young female worker in the lab that actually was published out of that lab and did exist and worked in that lab. But around the time that this broke, she actually disappeared. Probably, it's thought that she may have died. She